Ladies and gentlemen, we alive. We alive. Japere, who's it? So, a very interesting topic today. We are lost in time, so we are going to do a review about Elbaph and the recent events that happened in Elbaph, which for me are quite interesting, because instead of getting a silhouette, firstly, from Shamrock, we get Shamrock himself. Yo, Oratile, how are you? How are you, Poison? You quite early today. So we're going to discuss the previous events on Elbaph. No spoilers today because I've seen that you don't like spoilers at all. But a lot has happened since coming to Elbaph. Like when we took a trip with Dorian Pro, we didn't think that we're going to get such an event because I think this is going to be bigger than the Egghead incident. And if history proves to be true, I think we're going to get another leak. Someone might leak information in order to salvage the situation in Elbaf because I'm easy boy, just enjoying life, Michi. Yeah, nothing better than that. Nothing better than enjoying life. Life is quite good and it's short and fragile. You have to enjoy it, boys. You have to enjoy it. But life is a very sad topic. That's why we're going to discuss Egghead. Not even Egghead, but Elbaf. So in the recent events of Elbaf, and we just got into Elbaf, I don't know, like it's been a minute since I arrived in Elbaf, but it feels like in the outside world it's been a week or something like that because everything that has happened in Elbaf has been very, very dramatic and life changing for anyone who is a One Piece fan. Hence the topic, we are lost in time. I don't know if I really want to go back to the recent events of Egghead or of Elbaf, but I would like to stay more in Godville. Godville has a lot to give us, and I know it's going to be very short because of the powerhouses that are there in Godville. But I think that Godville has a lot to offer for everyone, you know. And even if Godville ends, just enjoying the grind. WT or grinding is something else. You have to wake up and do it. Have to. You have to. You have to. You have to. And truthfully, it's quite good that you're doing that, Poison. A lot of people in our streams are grinding, and it's good to hear from you that you're grinding too. It's all about that grind, that extra push. So without getting off topic and everything else, One Piece banger after banger from Oda Sensei. It's been banger after banger. Like I don't know how does One Piece keep getting slander, or how does it lose anime of the year or manga of the year to solo leveling and everything like that, because Oda has been in a very consistent and dedicated back to back bangers. Oda has been hitting us very hard, I think, since from one. You know, everything since from one has been insane. Like the introduction of Jewelry Pony, the introduction of Vegapunk as a female, everyone was shocked. Since from then, it's been spiraling sideways. Everything has been. Okay, so I'm back live. Man, latest events in One Piece. Lagging already. A lot has been happening and things have been going down sideways. But besides that, I just want to recap everything that happened since we arrived in Elbaph. So firstly, we have the likes of Road that was introduced. Road was introduced in a very sudden way. He was introduced as the man who is imitating the sun god. And after everything that we know, we basically saw through his actions of being a false god or things like that. And when we got to know who Road was and what he represented, quick transition. But Road, Luffy might have, you know, because the first thing that, or what were you saying? We were talking about Elbaph, nothing much. Elbaph talk, but the first thing that Luffy found interesting in Elbaf was Loki, and everyone else in the crew evade everyone else in Elbaf and try to find a safe familiar with in Elbaf because you couldn't trust. People are talking crazy about I don't blame them, Doug. I really, really don't blame them because things turn out to be way more different than we expected. The Rochester lander is quite welcomed at this point, as the pirate king that the media claims he is. We got to see a way, way different, or maybe a man of equal strength with Roger, maybe more, So the meeting of Xebec changed everything because it changed the perspective between Gab and Roger. What do they stand for exactly? Because the type of change they're trying to do is quite naive. It's when you look at Roger and Gab, you feel like you're looking at King Harald at some point. So I don't blame people for this slander, because I know that Roger might have been the one with the correct solution to taking down the world government. You had to wait, but Rox went for something different. Rox wanted to save his family. I don't know if the guys were familiar or they knew that the D clan was there in God Valley. But here's my thing. I think this is before Roger became a great pirate. And now we are in Rock's era. So you think this is rookie Roger? That might make sense. I think this event might also change the situation for Roger. But I don't think these guys changed much. If this was rookie Roger, it's understandable. I don't wanna lie, But what they did in God Valley is quite a letdown, you know, because even young Dragon knew that this was totally trash, So if a young man can feel that this environment is sickening, and people were ignoring it a very very long time, you know, I really think that the plan to take down the world government back then wasn't the best plan, but they could have landed serious damage, with King Harald and Rox, Whitebeard, and everyone there. I still think we are gonna get Roger's focus after God Valley, along with the rest of the Rocks pirate. Whitebeard, Shiki, Big Mom, and Kaido. Bro, that's one of the greatest comments that that drives the point home, that flashback piece and the fact that we are lost in time. You know, we are really lost in time because I think now we are looking more forward to what happened in the past as to what happened in the future or right now in the present. Because flashback pieces at its peak, prime, in fact, this is the best we've seen Oda and in a very long time. I don't know, but I don't think Shiki will be a very big factor in the One Piece world because I think Shiki is moving off his impulses. You know, the man Whitebeard also is not a very big focus, but Charlotte Linden is one big aspect of One Piece. We need to know what happened to Big Mom because Big Mom and Kaido are not the people we thought they were. They were, because when Kaido got the devil fruit from Big Mom, it seemed like it was something genuine. So this really turns the tides about the Rocks Pirates. I don't know. So people slandering Roger is quite okay with me. I don't know. And if he gets his return, that would be good. So I don't know. That would be very good. But without focusing on Roger, I think I'll come back on that. But we get to see that Elbaph is really big. It's bigger than we expected. It was even painful at looking at those panels, of Elbaf. But in the very large landscape of Elbaf lied a very big weakness, which was Loki himself and his lightning, because the greatest weakness of Elbaf is lightning, and I am black. I know that you can maybe conjure lightning with witchcraft, so does Imu have the power to destroy Elbaf? Maybe, we don't know. But everything that has happened before this event, it is quite distressing. I don't want to lie. This was quite distressing because after what was this? After we got to see the landscape of Elbaf, we get to go to the banquet or something like that. They throw a banquet, and in that banquet we see that everyone is joyful, everyone is eating. It's reunion after reunion. We see Oimuhashi, Dorian, Brogan destroyed crew together once again. But the most interesting thing is that a few panels later, we see Zoro and Luffy scheming about something. And Zoro and Luffy weren't scheming about something lightly or anything like that. These guys were discussing a serious treason in Elbaf. I'm talking about the number one crime in Elbaf, to unleash the Prince Loki and to get his keys. So they do get to know that the keys are in the castle, but when we go to the castle, or no, I think we didn't go to the castle first. Before we got to leave for the castle, Shamrock got there first. Before the Stride crew got to the castle, we got to see Shamrock and Kanko and Saint Thomas. You know, but at first it was Shamrock and Kanko only. With that being said, I must say the beginning to Elbaf was slow. It was really slow, dog. I don't want to lie to you. It looked like we were going to have a very good adventure, because we are out of a very big incident. People have to understand that we are out of the Egghead incident, and the Egghead incident was so insane in such a way that we didn't get to see him or Kanko or anything like that, and the God Knights. But that was a very peak incident in One Piece, and the fact that it's going to get animated soon, we are going to get into the peak of Egghead in anime soon. I don't know. I'm interested because Vegapunk's broadcast has started already. But Egghead aside, from Egghead to Elbaph, it felt like we are going to have a very good adventure in Egghead. We might meet Scopocapan, get some training, but things shifted a very, very big deal because when Shamrock arrived at the castle, everyone was shocked. You know, who is this figure? Because we can see that this is not Shanks. He doesn't have a scar, he has two hands, and the things that he was doing. No, and like we hit a section where people lost interest just before Imu arrives and Shamrock left. Yeah, but I don't think people lost interest at all because when Shamrock left, you know, our peak, our interest was because as Shamrock left, we got disappointed around that. People were like, thrown back at the fact that Shamrock was disappointed. But when the God Knights got into action, it was unlike anything we ever seen. Like seeing God Knights Devil Fruit in action. I know that the God Knights were quite slow, but everything that they did, that dinner that they laid there from dreams, they whipped out a table or a banquet from dreams. You know, you needed to sleep for you, or you need to dream what kind of food you want, or what kind of soul you want, and then the godness can get that to you through dreams. Through dreams, I forgot who. It's Saint Thomas and who I forgot who's the one who looks like a horse or something like that. I forgot those guys. But when that happened, things got interesting because the theories got more and more hyped. I don't know. Things got more interesting with the arrival of the God Knights. I know it might have seemed a bit, but the beginning with the Loki reveal, the Scopa Kapan reveal, is the best beginning of an arc and post time skip. That was very, very much interesting. That's why I said we couldn't lose interest in this chapter or in this arc, because the introduction was quite dope, because Scopa Kapan coming to, you mean Killingham? Yeah. So it's Killingham, Saint Somers, and Gango. So Killingham had a very powerful display of power. I don't know, because his ability to turn dreams into reality, it reminded us of someone very strong. It's Nika vibes, with Saint Killingham, anything is possible. But only if you're facing people with actual fears. If you're facing guys like Luffy doesn't have a fear unless it's Gab or Nami, So things get more complicated with killing him, but his limits are quite broad, But when we got to see Scopa Capon, because I don't know, like Scopa Capon is not even the best reveal yet. The best reveal was Colin, you know. After seeing Colin with Shanks in the anime or in the previous events of Elbaph, before the strides got even there, everyone was quite hyped, because this kid is a kid that reminded us of something that is way more important in One Piece, a kid's dream. How a kid just dreaming can change the entire sequence of One Piece, and that is Colin. And when we get introduced to Colin, the thing about the God Knights is we knew that they were strong, but before in Egghead, we were fighting the Gorosei and Kizaru, you know, and this made everything more interesting about the God Knights because aside from him, the God Knights were the only thing that was left to fill the puzzle about the world government, because while we thought we knew what the world government was capable of, because I don't wanna lie, I thought the world government had the Marines only as their defense, but when we got introduced to the Goroseis and the fact that God Knights exist out there, my mind got blurred. I thought that it was getting more and more difficult to beat the Celestial Dragons. But as I look around and maybe as I learn more about One Piece and as we get more reveals, like the recent, so with Luffy and Gear 5, this killed the tension and fear for me because after Luffy did to the Gorosei and Kizaru, I wasn't worried, not at all, bro. You know, I still, I'm still not worried about the God Knights at all because when you look at God Valley, you get relaxed when you think of the God Knights, unless they've not even because in this moment there are three, not even three, there are two God Knights because Ganko has been taken over. There are two God Knights, so that's not something to make you shake in your boots. No, I'm still not scared about the God Knights. The only scary factor in Godvid in what you call in Elbaph is is him. You know, things were quite interesting because we wanted to know if the God Knights were immortal. And we got a confirmation that yes, the God Knights were immortal. That is one of the biggest power ups of the God Knights. And the fact that they can be strong. We know that Imu is not the one or is not likely to choose someone weak to be part of the God Knights. He won't do such a thing. You know, just because you're an interesting figure, then you join the crew. No, I think Imu it goes with strength and strength alone. So Imu has done a very good deal protecting himself with the God Knights and everything like that. But when we saw that the God Knights were immortal, now we had a serious problem. How do we deal with this immortality? Because we cannot have immortal beings like Madara, Uchiha, and a war in Naruto. No, we need to have people who can get killed. We needed to find a way to kill the God Knights. But what I'll give to the God Knights is that we only know about half of them. So we can assume that the one that are gonna be revealed are gonna be strong based on what we've seen. You know, I think that's true. I think the strength will really much vary when it comes to the God Knights. But I think the best of the God Knights was sent in this mission because I don't think you can underestimate Elbaph at all. But taking into advantage that these guys are immortal and they would die to the amount that they would figure a way out to take over Elbaph. But there's Kopakapan anyway. But the biggest problem in Elbaph is that does Imo know that Straw Hat is here? That's the biggest problem. That does Imo know that Luffy is in Elbaph right now? Because I don't I don't I don't wanna lie, God Knights coming into Elbaph is quite a great plan right now, but does Imo know that Straw Hat Luffy is here? We know Shamrock is number one. There's probably number one or two between Shamrock and Ganko and Summers. Yeah. And I think Ganko maybe isn't that strong because I don't think Ganko is aware of what she's capable of. Or I don't think that Ganko is willing to use all of her strength. Ganko seemed like a very chilled guy. But the biggest problem is the Straw Hat Pirates. Because I know that the God Knights would have find a way to win because no one in Elbaf would have allowed Loki to be let out or to escape. But I think Skapa Kapan would have done it eventually. If there was a man to free Loki, if the Straw Hats were not there, it would have been Scopa. Scopa Kapan would have took drastic measures to save Elbaf. And I think Loki would have listened to Yasan. Yo, Luffy fan, how are you? How are you? You know, the thing with Ganko is being a method for Imu to be anywhere she is via position. Dog, the Ganko and Imu combination is quite insane. Just got back from school. Nice, poison. At least today we didn't get you in class, you know. Hope you had a good sense, honestly. But the Ganko method is quite insane. You know, Ganko is quite the best figure out there when it comes to One Piece. You know, because Ganko gives Imu abilities far beyond anyone else. No one else will ever get such insane powers. You know, Imu uses a grimoire for heaven's sake. You know, and the only thing that can go against Imu at this point is the man himself, Nika. And lo and behold, Nika is in the right place at the right time. Okay, which is quite taking us back, you know, because when Vegapunk said it that a lot of people were waiting for this god, Elbaph was one of those nations. You know, Elbaph spent an eternity waiting for Nika. I don't wanna lie. Elbaph has been patient. You know, so to think that Imu, I'll be back my G 10 minutes, no stress. To think that Imo is here at the very wrong time of all things, you know, because whatever Imo has planned for Elbaf, it won't work. I'm bees where I am. It's bees where I am. No stress, G. You can get to work with G. You can get to work, brother. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. We are very, very back. So, Imo made landfall in Elbaf right after the battle just got out of hand, you know, because not even out of hand. I don't know. Things were quite taken for the good knights, you know. The good knights had everything else handled when it comes to the battle in Elbaf. I don't know that. But things got out of control for the giants themselves, you know, because this is no mere attack. This is an attack from the best of the best soldiers from the world government. You know, so this proves that when West comes to shove, we might see a domi reverse on some of the like Akainu might get a domi reverse. I don't know. You know, Akainu seems like a man to be foolish enough to fall for Imu's politics. You know, I think Akainu will be the one to be shot on the back by the world government at the end of it. You know, this domi reverse thing is not a good sign for the fleet admiral for any admiral. You know, Kizaru, but Fujitora, I'm sure that Fujitora won't be a man to fall for the Domirivasi, but it might be possible, you know, because we have seen the world government step people in their back for a very, 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 very long time. And we know that with the Domirivasi, Imu doesn't gain a soldier, she also gains your lifespan, like Big Mom, you know. So Imu is quite a very, very interesting topic. But a very, very good thing happened in Elbaf, you know. Someone finally decided to ask Loki a question as to what happened. You know, I don't know what took people so long to ask Loki the very simple question as to what happened. And the beauty of One Piece began, you know, because we got to see Elbaf in a very fragile position. You know, firstly, Elbaf was striving, and then the fall began, the calamities, and all of that. But let me not rush into things. But with the question that was asked to Luke as to what happened, you know, we got a very serious flashback. We got to see the era of giants, because before the rocks era, before the pirate era, we had a era of giants, where giants were the kings or the beasts in the ocean. The most terrifying thing in the ocean was not pirates, was not marines at that point, but it was the giants themselves. And the man who was in front of it all was Harald, the prince himself. At that time, he was the king. I don't know. I'm not sure because in that giant era, that was the era which Elbaph became, or King Harald became a king. That's when uh, he ascended as the king of Elbaph. But with the great giant era happening, I don't know, maybe Rox was still at Godville at that time, but it was quite run. I really wish that King Harald would have went to Godville before he met his mistress. Because the lady changed King Harald very, very sincerely. I don't know that. But King Harald met a giant at his journey, because he was king of the oceans or the most powerful being in the ocean at that time. But he met someone as powerful as he is, that's Harujan's mother. I forgot the name, I don't know. So with Harujan's mother being in one of this the islands that King Harald visits, he gets to see her in a very misleading situation. She was acting like a hostage, or she was acting like a circus clown. She was a circus clown to be specific. And then King Harold was insulted. He invaded the island. He destroyed everything. And then the lady told her that he needs to take her back because the people of that island saved her. And then that's where we get maybe the changing of the king, King Harald. It's Ada. I cannot forget Ada's name. It's impossible to forget Ada's name. But Ada gets to change King Harald in ways we didn't imagine. From the selfish bred to a responsible king, which was very admirable because Elbaph made a lot of allies and the biggest enemy of them all. When you're an enemy of the world government, you can't escape their shadow. You know, it's really hard to escape the shadow of the world government. You can ask cities like O'Hara or any other nation, but you cannot escape the fangs of the world government for too long. But what Elbaf did was try to transition into a nation that can join the world government, which didn't end well for Elbaf. And even the king himself, got into a very tight situation where he got to betray a friend. You know, sometimes the friends you get, you don't choose the friends you make. Is that even possible? No, you choose the friends you make, or you don't in this instance because King Harald didn't agree with Rox, and Rox didn't agree with the doings of King Harald. So things got very, very much complicated in that aspect. But in this time, we get to see that the King Harald gets his firstborn, which is Hydrogen, one of the princes in Elbaf. And then not not long after the arrival of Hydrogen, we got to see Loki's mother and the birth of Loki. And then that's where things take a dark turn in Elbaf, and everything is blamed on Loki. Like it's quite shaming that an entire nation can blame all of the events on a small kid like Loki or a brat like Loki because at that time Loki was an infant. I don't know that. Loki wasn't even a man to get that much slander. He couldn't stand for himself. I'm back now. So I left off from Loki's suffering, So Loki got tossed to the underworld at a very young age. That's attempted murder from your own mom, you know. So Loki tried to get back to his mother, with sheer strength and instinct. As to how he was able to locate his mom, no one knew because Loki defied the odds. He climbed the tree. I forgot what the tree is. It's the Adam tree, but Loki climbed the tree to get back to his own mom, the mom who hates him so much that she cannot look him into his eyes. I don't think Loki got breastfeeded at all. So that's serious hate from your mother. And then after all that, King Harald leaves, or King Harold was away at that time, but a series of events started to happen in Elbaph, like the famine in Elbaph. I don't think that the incident with Charlotte Linlin was part of it, but a lot of events happened in Elbaph whereby Elbaph was left stranded, where there was infighting. There was civil war where people were fighting between each other. There was famine, there was drought, there was no food at all in Elbaph. People are starting to raid each other's home for anything they can get. So things got so bad that everyone started to believe and blame Loki at the very same time. Loki was the reason why Elbaf was going through whatever that was happening at that time. So Loki gets to grow a bit older, you know, and his mom finally dies, which is quite sad. Which is quite sad, because not the actually. So after Loki got everything that he didn't deserve, because at the end of the day, Loki was decayed. So Loki finally grows up to finally survive on his own. Because at that age, I think he had already made friends with the beasts in the underworld. And in One Piece, you might find it hard to believe, but beasts do take care of people, at the end of the day in One Piece. That actually happens. You will find a beast taking care of a kid in One Piece. So with that being said, I think the beasts of the underworld get to groom Loki, and Loki grows a bit in the underworld, and he survives also in the upper realm of Elbaf. But Loki is causing serious damage to the upper world, because he doesn't get along really well with the other kids. He's always in fights with the other kids, calling them weak and things like that. You know, in a sense, things get out of control. I don't want to lie. Things got with Loki, but it was his way of fighting his loneliness or trying to fight it, you know, which didn't work, obviously. So with Loki suffering like that, he gets a chance to try to kill himself again, but lo and behold, the boy can't kill himself at all. He can't do that to himself. So Loki survives another fall under to the underworld. It was really a life change. Loki got to meet a man called Xebec. So Rox Xebec makes his landfall to Elbaf. And then here, Rox is traveling with Newgate. That's the only, it's Newgate and Sheik. You know, those are the two people that Rox was traveling with at that time. but not making it back So I'm back live. Sorry about that, you guys. The lagging is quite insane, and it doesn't stop there. But it's it's crazy how Rox was portrayed in You Back. Yeah, I'm back a bit. Yeah, it's gonna disconnect soon. But it's crazy how Rox was portrayed in the silhouette panel where he stabbed Loki versus the actual flashback. Yeah, it was. I don't wanna lie, but was it a silhouette or that's I think Loki was the man who revealed Rox himself because the first silhouette of Rox that we got was him arriving in Godville. You know, when we got the Godville flashback from Kuma again. You know, so when we got to see Rox step Loki, I think we thought that was the kind of man that Rox is. But when we got to know more about Rox, and it didn't get better. You know, Rox became a great pirate into our eyes. You know, we got to see why Oda holds Rox in high value like this because I think Sengoku didn't do justice to Rox at all. You know, I don't think Sengoku did justice to Rox because when he introduced Rox, it was like Rox was a hood gang or he was some madman, you know, a mad pirate, and it wasn't like that at all. Rox was a D clan at the end of the day, you know. He had a vision, he had reasons for his own actions, you know. So I think that took a great deal of time for Oda to explain. You know. But besides being lost with Rox and his days, but after we get to know about Rox, you know, Rox gets to summon the king back to Elbaph, you know. But this is where things change in One Piece. Yeah, before the flashback, when Luffy mentioned Shanks and then Loki mentioned a thought about who he idolized. This is before Imo showed and other godnets. Yo, so you're telling me that Loki introduced rocks to us? But that is insane, dog. I don't know. You know, the fact that these two men have infectious dreams, you know. I think now we have equal appreciation for both Teach and Luffy. You know, we really, really appreciate Teach and Luffy in different ways when it comes to Rocks and Roger, you know, because as much as we appreciate a being who is taking care of Rox's will, the fact that there is a Rox's action will not go unnoticed. That's a very, very big W. You know, and it stands to show that Rox is a very great pirate. But I don't understand why I'm bringing Shanks and Rox into the same conversation. But these men are the men of the same stature. I keep on telling you guys, you know, Rox and Shanks are not that much different. But with with low key things really really got out of hand, you know, because we get to see that Loki gets in. It was a foreshadowing for the flashback. Remember when Loki told Rox to fight him, and then he stabbed him, and then Whitebeard tried to Kuza, but he told Whitebeard to shut up. Yeah, Whitebeard needed to know his place, dog. You know, you cannot Kuza that type of situation. There's no Kuzaing that. You know, no way you can Kuza such a situation. Noma inqosikudelela, dog. You need to squabble up. You need to fucking squabble up. But Rox really pulled through with the action of hurting Loki, you know, but that signified something important, you know. But In other views or in other point of views, it might be like Rox is evil, but at the end of the day, Rox had to make Loki understand that you mean a lot more than you expect to your father, because at that point, Loki was like, there is no way the king of Elbaph is coming back to the island just for me. Mara stabbing kid Loki is crazy. Nah, dog. Loki was suicidal, dog. You have to understand that you meet a kid that thinks that, what, my parents don't care about me. You know, that's not quite a very good thing to hear about. You don't expect to hear things like that. That's borderline insanity. Oh, that's worrying. And Rock stabbing Luke, it wasn't fatal. Though. We know that if he wanted to kill Loki, he could have get it done with. You know, Rox didn't kill Loki. Instead, he inflicted a wound, a serious wound that could get Harold back to the island, which happened. Harold came back for his son, which we got to see Loki happy for the first time. Whether you like it or not, that's the first time we saw Loki happy. And Loki, that was his father came back to the island just for him. You know, quite great things for King Harold. We know we might have wanted that he could Loki, but we know that the new world is no place for a kid, even if it's Loki and his strength. Kid Loki, you cannot take to the new world. No kid is ready for the new world at all. Unless you're jewelry pony. I don't lie. If you're jewelry pony, you can go anywhere and survive. But anyone else won't survive in the new world. But Loki was quite impressed by the fact that his father came back, and then we get to hear more about Roxy's dream to take over the world, and from seeing Loki happy, and I got to see Loki inspired. Remember the chapter 1152 and the conversation about Conqueror's Haki? There's a theory that says Scopa won't send Sanji Conqueror's Haki because he's suppressing it. I don't think Sanji is in a situation to become a king in any way or form. We know that Sanji has a very serious battle with authority, because we know that a conqueror has to believe in themselves in a certain pedigree, and I don't think Sanji has come into fact with that kind of selfishness. It's not even a question, because Sanji is not like the other characters. He was born a prince. He's a noble, but he doesn't want to become a conqueror in a sense. Sanji is not a person who wants to stand on top of other people's dreams. You know, like Luffy. Luffy doesn't want to become a king. He was just born with it. I think that's the difference with Luffy. Luffy came with this gift in this world. He was born with the the haki of a king. But Sanji is going to be a very serious battle with his conqueror's haki. If he gets it, I don't know, because like Kaido said, we don't need that much conqueror's haki. We don't need that many. A select few will be fine, because that will make their battles much more interesting. Because we have Boa Hancock, which is a conqueror. She can take one of the female gods knights on. So we have a very interesting battle. If Charlotte Lindin comes back too, we will have another female conqueror's haki. So this is going to be one of the most interesting things, with Sanji, whether he gets it or not. But even if he doesn't get it, there's a lot he can get. If Sanji's future sight becomes up, think about all the conquerors who don't have an ambition per se, but have the will of king like Rayleigh and Katakuri. Don't you think Sanji fits? Sanji does not fit the equation, because when you think of Rayleigh, Rayleigh is like Zoro. Being a king is something that was gifted to people like Rayleigh and Luffy and so even Katakuri. Katakuri was born strong. We saw Katakuri in a flashback whereby the God Knights, or not even the God Knights, but remember when not even the God Knights, but the Rocks pirates were infiltrating an island. You know, we saw Katakuri standing like this after plundering all the treasure. Katakuri was standing like this. You could see the pride that was in Katakuri even from childhood. So Katakuri knew that he was him. He knew that he was the king, and he is the king. So I think that's how Katakuri got Conqueror's haki. Like Doflamingo. Doflamingo had pride. And he believed that he has haki out of that. So Conqueror's haki comes in a different way, in different ways. Yamato got Conqueror's haki maybe from Kaido, but he unlocked it through ambition. So this is a very different topic when it comes to Conqueror's haki. My point is that Sanji to doesn't doesn't have to have an ambition to get Conqueror's powerful way. I think Sanji's Conqueror's haki will be a get Conqueror's haki at the end of the day. Do you remember how Nami's Conqueror's haki was flashed by Jinbe? Because Jinbe, when Luffy was getting beat by Nami, Jinbe was like, is that Conqueror's haki? Jinbe was like, she's emanating a serious aura. Is that Conqueror's haki? You know, I think Sanji's Conqueror's haki will be in that way, whereby it will be funny. I think Sanji, if he gets Conqueror's haki, it will be the very first Conqueror's haki, whereby he won't notice it too. The Nami thing was a gag. We are not sure though, because if it was a gag, but coming from Jinbe knows a lot of, even scared of Usopp and his lies now, because Usopp was like, with Nami, it's not just a gag. We have to explain the power of love at the end of the day. And if Nami doesn't get uh, Haki or Conqueror's Haki through love, like the person who is looking for treasure at most times, but Nami has more love than anyone else. I think Gab, Scopa Kapan, and Nami will be under the same umbrella at the end of the day. They will be under the same umbrella in a way that they get Conqueror's Haki to a very. But back to Sanji, him not noticing it will be a part. Possible. Let's just put it there. It is possible for Sanji to get Conqueror's Haki. But Sanji, I really think that Sanji is really strong on his own. And Sanji's use of Haki and his armament Haki with his strength, his fire, the only thing you can just wish for Sanji is for him to get more fired up. That's what my theory says. Yeah, Sanji is in stealth mode, but I think that if Sanji had Conqueror's Haki, he will notice it. Sanji is not as foolish as we may think he is, so if Sanji might awaken Conqueror's Haki, it is possible that he might get it, because I really believe that Conqueror's Haki is not the gist of it all, because right now we are not even sure if Gap has Conqueror's Haki to be exact. We are not sure if Sengoku of the Buddha priest has Conqueror's Haki, you know. So Conqueror's Haki is a very thin line, I don't know that. It is important, but Haki is important in its whole, So I think if you're a master in one aspect of Haki, you can actually activate the others. It's possible. Oh my god, the broadcasting is so bad. This is so sick. But after we meet Scopa, things take a very drastic turn. Ah, welcome for Andina. I don't know, very pound. Fish. Nope. Yeah. Ah, so Scapa Kapan is the man of the chapter. I don't know. In fact, can Scapa Kapan get Pirate of the Decade award? Because seriously, this Kappa effect is none other than we've seen from any other One Piece legend. We got to see God Valley thanks to Scappa, and he was there. The best part was that Scappa he didn't tell us anything from his own mouth. He wanted us to hear things from the horse's mouth. Scappa became true in a way that he didn't want to influence any situation in any way or form. He just wanted to make sure that things happen according. But when Loki gets into Rox and the reveal about Rox's dream, you know, we get to know that Rox wants the world, which shakes Loki to the core, because Loki has never met a man with such ambitions. In fact, with so much guts, because Loki at the end of the day thought that his father was weak. Whether you like it or not, I agree with him. You know, King Harald was naive at the end of the day, boys. So Loki got inspired not by not by the king himself,